Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the HaskinCast Podcast. I am your host, Scott Haskin, here with yet another episode. Very excited to bring you another guest and another great interview. This is getting to be a lot of fun, and I've really enjoyed, all the interviews that I've had, catching up with old friends, meeting new friends. It's just been fantastic, and I hope that you guys have been enjoying it. By the number of plays I'm getting, I'm going to have to think that you are. So thank you for taking the time to give me a chance, give my guests a chance, and listen to what they have to say. And thank you for coming back week after week and enjoying a new episode. So I was going to have an episode come out on Saturday, but time restraints did not allow for that. So I will be bringing you that episode in a couple of days as a special release episode. And we'll be talking with an old friend and a brand new friend, my first 3-person podcast interview, which was a lot of fun. And you'll be seeing that, like I said, in a couple of days. Right now, as I'm recording this intro, it is Saturday. And tonight I have the Lost 80s live concert off of Fremont Street here in Las Vegas. And I'm very excited about that. I went last year. There were 16 bands. This year, I believe it's 15. Berlin, unfortunately, is the band that will not be there this year, but there's some other new surprises. Tommy Two-Tone will be there doing Jenny, I would imagine. Interesting story about that song. I used to work for an inventory company, and one early morning, I'm trying to remember, I think it was in Colorado Springs, we were doing inventory at Michael's Arts and Crafts. And it's probably, I want to say, 6 a.m. sometime. We're just kind of waking up. But we started the inventory, and they wanted us all to count the plastic flowers, just all gang up and get the plastic flowers done. I don't know why, but that's what they wanted us to do. And they were playing this, I don't know if it was an 80s station or if they just had like 80s music pipe fed in or whatever. But we're starting to count, 1, 2, 3. And then Jenny comes on. So, of course, we're all going 1, 2, 3, 8, 6, 7, 5. Damn it. And then we stop, and then we try starting, and we just gave up, and we stood there while the entire song played. And then as soon as it was done, we started counting again, because there's just no way. It just throws you off completely. So that's a bit of fun related to that song. I remember Missing Persons was one of the headliners, and then the final headliner was A Flock of Seagulls, because they had been the only band to win a Grammy of all the bands. And so they played a few songs, some of which I did not know, but enjoyed very much. The whole day was great. But it's so weird because I was too young to go to shows in the early 80s when most of these bands were at their heyday. And it's so strange to me to see just a singer and a keyboard player. And sometimes the music is playing and the keyboard player isn't even doing anything because it's all programmed. And, the singer's dancing around, but there's really it's weird because there's really not that same energy on stage as the bands that come out as full bands and have, drummer, bass player, guitarist, keyboardist, all playing the whole time. And then they'll go to a band that's, again, just like a singer and a keyboard player or, maybe a guitar player or drummer. It's such a weird thing because the energy is just so strange to me. I'm not used to that in a live venue. It seems to me that if they would have recorded the albums that way, they still would have toured with a band, something to make the stage a little more exciting as it went. And then having a 2-person band and then a full band and then another 2-person band come on, that second 2-person band kind of deflates the order of things. So if they would have been able to schedule it where they had, the band's numbers of members grew as the show went on from 2 people to 3 people to 5 people or whatever as it progressed, that might have worked better. But then the scheduling of, this band playing versus that band playing might not have been as well. I don't know. I just remember it felt really strange to be at a show where that was going on. And it's definitely different than the energy of going to, say, a concert with a rock band where, it's just all energy. You got 5 or 6 musicians up there just driving the whole time. And, you can look at any part of the stage and see something going on, where here you've just got, a couple of things to watch going on. And sometimes there's audio and no motion. And it's just weird. But I'm looking forward to going tonight. Had a lot of fun last year. I didn't do any of the meet and greets last year, but I want to do that tonight. So we'll see if they have that again. Hopefully they will. And what else is going on? So then I'm headed to Arizona, and I'm going on, if you guys listened to Michael McPherson's interview a couple of months back or a few months back, he does the Arizona Sedona Night Vision UFO tour. And I'll be taking that on Monday night and doing a recording, my first remote recording. I bought one of the Tascam handheld recorders that seems to hold up pretty well. I used a Zoom in the past on a project, and I used a Tascam on a project, but this one is really nice and got a really good sound. So I'll be curious to see how well it picks things up, and if the conversation flows and it's interesting, whether we see anything or not, maybe I'll bring you that, because it's like you could do the tour, but you can't. These things don't work, like they're not actors. They don't work on command. So you can go out and maybe you'll see nothing, or you can go out and maybe you'll see things that you don't know what they are. And, I certainly believe that there's more than just us and this one tiny dot in the entire universe. I have a ridiculous time believing that we're the only thing out there. And I've certainly seen some things that I can't explain. And I don't know, maybe some of that is domestic things that are advanced technology that we've created that have not been released to the public, but they have to test flight them. Maybe they are off-world things. I don't know. All I know is that the things that I've seen, I cannot definitively say it is this or it is that. So it just remains as a question mark in my mind. So I'm very excited. Michael's such a good friend of mine, and Carla, who was also on recently, his wife, they're both such good friends of mine. And I'm looking forward to spending some time with them and going out and checking out this tour, because I've not done it before. So it should be a lot of fun. That's pretty much what's going on for me. I finally finished Haunted Holidays, Deadly Christmas 3. The album is uploaded to my distributor and will be released October 18th. Unfortunately, because there are only 9 songs on the album, the distributor does not allow me to do a preview song, which if you have 10 or more songs, then you can release one a week ahead of time, and it will launch kind of as a single. And but unfortunately, I'm not able to do that because there's only 9 songs on the album. So I'm thinking about doing like a pre-release on maybe SoundCloud or something like that, or maybe YouTube. So as the weeks move on, I'll make the decision on that. And of course, I'll let you guys know. But October 18th is the definitive release date for the album. You'll be able to get it on iTunes, Amazon, Spotify, Google Play, all the relevant places. And I'm really excited about that. I'm very happy with this album. And thanks to my friend Randy Rohrbach, who was another one of my earlier guests on the show and will definitely be coming back when we can schedule it. He is my second set of ears for mixing. He's got such a great sense, and especially because he and I have known each other so long, he's listened to a lot of the stuff that I've done, and he understands what I want out of a project, whether it be a Mental Sauna project or a Haunted Holidays project. He knows what I like in my sound. So when I send him something and I say, really all I want to know is the dialogue buried in the mix? Is it out front in the mix? Like, have I seated it well within the mix? And he always comes back with some amazing things. And he said I was really close on this one. There were a couple of tweaks that he suggested, which I, of course, did take him up on. And it's just those little subtleties sometimes that can make the biggest difference in a mix. And I remember listening to or watching a video on mastering audio, because, even though I've been doing this for a long time, I still like to kind of see if there's more that I can learn that I don't know. New tools come out, things get easier. And there was something that the guy did in the video, and he's like, you can't even hear the difference in the sound now, but when you do this 3 steps from now, this is going to make a big difference. And as I started to dissect, and you get to that step where it does make a difference, and then you go back and you see, well, here's what would have happened if he hadn't have done that. You really start to fine tune the process, and you really know how to make decisions. Really, from a second nature standpoint, you're not even consciously thinking about, oh, I need to do this. You just do it. And so I think it's also easy, though, to get lost in that. So I like to use Randy's services for that, because he really has a great ear for it. And every time he and I have worked together on something, it's just been fantastic. And I think that my projects benefit greatly from Randy's knowledge and his willingness to take the time to do that. So thank you very much, Randy. I greatly appreciate it, if you're not sick of me telling you that already. But today, we have another musician connection from my past. Christopher Valin and I have known each other for a very, very long time. We were in a band together back when he had just graduated high school. I was in my senior year. just about to start my senior year when I was offered an opportunity to audition for a band that he started called Joker's Wild, which was a progressive metal band, which was very popular in Colorado Springs at the time. If you guys remember my interview with Travis Leroy, he was the bass player of a band called Salem Spade. We did some shows together. And it was a lot of fun. It was just a great time in music, and the Colorado Springs scene was so fantastic. A lot of great bands. The music that, to me, I still enjoy listening to, and it's of course, it's all transferred from analog cassette tape because we didn't have CDs at the time, or we were just starting to get CDs at the time, but they were certainly beyond the reach of anything that we could afford recording on. So I got to know Chris through the band, and we just stayed friends after all these years. And he lived not that far from me in California, the time that I had moved out there. So we got together a couple times. Wonderful family, very talented, all of them just absolutely wonderful. And I was really excited to have him on the show. He sends me his books, and I say on the show a lot of times, and this is very true, that I really don't have the time to read, but Chris's stories are typically short stories they're just so engaging. You fly through them in a matter of a half an hour, some of them a little bit longer, but they're very fun, quick reads, and I really enjoy them. So it's easy to just say, okay, I could block off enough time to read this. And then when I do, I don't want to put it down. And then I wish it was longer because the story gets so engrossing, or, you really start to care about the characters or what the situation is. So it's amazing how compelling you can make a short story, and you can grip a reader and really engage them and get them invested in the situation or a character. And honestly, I really think that Chris is a master of that. I don't think I could do that. I mean, the stuff that I've written, and hopefully you guys will see that if my book ever comes out. But it's something that it really takes a skill to be able to grip people quickly. And if you only have a 20-page story or a 25-page story, you don't have time to not get people engaged, because the story's going to be over fast. Whatever's happening is going to happen very quickly. You don't get, 50 pages of background on a character so that you get to know them. You just have to love them right away. And the way that he writes, you do. And it's a real skill that he has honed. And I'm one of those people that as a writer myself, I can really appreciate that. And I'm sure when you guys go read his stuff that you will too. So let me just stop babbling and bring Chris on, because I think you're going to enjoy this interview. And if you're a fan of Batman, we talk about that too. Here he is. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I am very excited to bring on my next guest. We have played in a band together. We've talked philosophy together. We've stayed up late nights playing Risk into the wee hours of the morning. My friend and author, Chris Valin. Chris, how are you today?
Great. How you doing, Scott?
I'm doing great, my friend. I realized something just before I called you. We actually met in, I think it was late August of 1989. So it's been 30 years.
I thought the same thing when you were going to call. I was thinking the same thing. It's been exactly 30 years, basically.
Yeah, it really has. And I got to tell the story of the day that we met, because I still think that this is one of the weirdest days of my life.
Okay.
I was getting ready to audition for the band Joker's Wild, which you were a founder member of.
Mm-hmm.
And a really good progressive metal band in Colorado Springs. And you auditioned me at the bass player for a band called Havoc's house. And it was out in like the boonies in Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
And you guys had something happened. Like I got there, and you guys were there, and I met you, and then something happened and you all had to leave. And so I'm just there setting up my drums, which at the time took forever because it was a Fortress. And and then the bass player's dad came in. He's like, "You can't be here." And I'm like, "I got this audition." He's like, "You can't be in the house." And so I just sat out at my car for 45 minutes waiting for you guys to get back. I couldn't set up my kit. I couldn't do anything. It was just a kind of a crazy day. And then we did the audition, and you guys hired me, which was great. But yeah, that was definitely just like, I don't know what to do here.
Yeah, that was weird. I apologize again for that.
Oh, no.
Years later, but
yeah, I'm still upset. Yeah.
Yeah. I had some similar experiences with him. So
Yeah, I remember our rhythm guitarist Brian DeLay did too. And what's really fascinating is watching, like, when we were kids, because we were like 17 to 19 age range back then, and it's really fascinating watching what's happened to everyone since then. That bass player Doug, he went on to be like an upright bass player, doing a lot of classical stuff. Brian DeLay, our rhythm guitarist, went on to be a professor. You're a teacher. Who knew that all these different because we all thought we would be on tour in a tour bus together and, living out of hotels and whatnot.
Yeah, you're right. We should all be, probably dead from overdoses by now, shouldn't we?
Well, most of us, yeah. But the coolest story though that I can tell about Joker's Wild Days was we played on Friday the 13th at a place called Renner's Bar in downtown Colorado Springs. And I remember the first and the third band, because we played second, and the first and the third band had traded singers. And the singer for the opening band the opening band was the sound engineer. And this big fight broke out between the two singers. We weren't sure if we were even going to play or not that night. And it was just this big mess. And I remember driving Brian home, and we flipped on the radio and Turn the Page came on by Bob Seger. And I mean, it's this perfect song about how exhausting the gigging life is and all that. And I'm like, we just looked at each other and we're like, this is the perfect end to the night now. We got through it. But that was a great show. And I have some really great memories playing with you guys. It was such an honor to be invited in and to be brought in part of the creative process. It was a lot of fun. And I don't really think that people that have never been in a band really understand what that kind of camaraderie is like.
No, they don't. I don't think so either.
You still play now and then, don't you?
Yeah, occasionally, but I haven't been in a band in many years now.
Yeah, same here. I wouldn't mind doing it again, but it would have to be the right circumstances for me to invest in it, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, at my age, it would have to be a very special situation.
Yeah. And I don't mean it to sound arrogant, because it's not like I'm better than anybody else, but it's more along the lines of, as we get older, we decide where our time is most valuable. And it's more important to capitalize on enjoying the time that we spend than it used to be when we were 17 and 18. Because if you didn't like something, you got through it, you went to the next thing. But now it's like, I kind of feel like I want to soak up every minute of happiness that I can.
Yeah, that's well put. Well put.
Thanks. And I feel even older now.
Yeah.
But we could walk down memory lane all night. Let's talk about this new book that you have out. Which one do you want to start with?
How about the magazine that's coming out next week?
Okay, now I got to tell you, and thank you for sending me the preview copy. Guys, this is a stunning piece of artwork. I've never seen anything like it. Now, in all fairness, I don't look at a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
But the visual component is so impressive to me. It's the comic books that we read in the 70s, but done in today's time, with the quality of graphics that we have, with the ingenuity and the creativity that we have nowadays. It's visually stunning. It's very intelligent. How did all this come together?
Well, it started a couple years ago. There's another author, named Artie Cabrera, and I was a fan of his work. I had read a couple of his stories and really liked them. And one of his short stories that I had read was called Johnny Ranger Space Detective, and it took place in a place called Gravity City that he invented. And it's kind of if you could combine the gritty 1970s New York type thing and old cop shows from the 70s like Starsky and Hutch and Kojak and that kind of thing, and then throw in some 80s aesthetic like Streets of Fire,
right?
And then put that in outer space and make it a city like in Blade Runner or Judge Dredd or that kind of future megalopolis. So he created this place, and then he eventually, we worked together on another project. He asked me if I'd be interested in working on Gravity City with him, and I was thrilled because I just loved the whole concept. So to talked to him a lot about it, and we worked things out, and we were going to work on some novels together that took place in Gravity City, and then an anthology that actually came out last year called Once Upon a Time in Gravity City. Mm-hmm. And that one has, I think, about 10 stories that take place there. And then earlier this year, I'm trying to remember, I think maybe it was at the beginning of the year sometime, he was talking to somebody else he knew, and they suggested that he make kind of a magazine because he has such great graphic designer skills, and kind of promote the whole world that he had created and so forth. And we started discussing that, and we ended up going in a little bit of a different direction. So what we did was what it turned into kind of a combination of Starlog magazine, combined with heavy metal and old comic books. So we have there that's really cool. Some short stories, some articles, some interviews. We interviewed Mazel, who works the project coordinator for Fractured FX, and he worked on movies. Done the practical effects, not the digital effects, but they do the practical. The real blood and guts and makeup for movies like the Aquaman and Westworld and Swamp Thing and all kinds of cool stuff.
I love that we're still doing that we haven't just took, everything over to the digital side. I mean, I really think that practical still has so much value.
Oh yeah. And it's so cool. It's so cool. I've gotten to go and tour the place a couple times, and it's just amazing.
Oh, I bet.
The stuff that you see when they're working on it. And we have an interview with a bunch of other people that are involved in different cool things, and so that was the core of the magazine. But then what we also wanted to add a lot of cool artwork, make it a little bit like Heavy Metal magazine. Mm-hmm. Let's see. And the ads was the other thing. We wanted to give it the feel of old magazines and comic books from the 70s with the what do you call those little monkeys?
The sea monkeys,
those kinds of ads, or the Charles Atlas ads where get kicked in the face with sand at the beach because you're such a weakling, and so you can get listen to this record or read this book and you'll be able to defend yourself.
Oh yeah, I forgot about those.
Yeah, and
the X-ray glasses and
yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. So we have a bunch of fake ads along those lines, and we've got some humor in there, and it's just it's hard to explain without seeing it, but it really works. It all works together. It's basically, on the one hand, it's nostalgic, and on the other hand, it's just cutting edge graphics and design. So I think I can't believe how good it came out. Artie deserves most of the credit. I was an editor and a contributor, and I was in on a lot of the decision making, but Artie's really the driving force behind it. He's amazing.
But it sounds like it was a real organic progression from the original idea to where it came out, that, right. And that's what I love about working with other people. And, as I go back to the band example, when you're working alone and you're responsible for everything, you make a decision, you second guess it 10 or 12 times, then you go back to the original idea, then you go back to one of your alternates and you drive yourself nuts. When you're working with other people, there's a different way that it develops because it's bouncing from one person to another. I might say something and you go, oh, you know what? Yeah, we could do that, but this, and it just expands. And when it's good and everyone's in the right zone, then you get an amazing this. When you start to attach to your idea, and your idea having to be the thing that is used, that's when it starts to fragment a little bit.
Right. I agree. And Artie and I really work well together. I think that we get along really well. And even though we've never met in real life, we've only corresponded over the phone and on online and stuff. But we really mesh well, I think.
Well, that's so important. And that, I think, is really the beauty of the technology of today's world, is that we don't have to be in the same room to create something magical like we did in the old days.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I've already started calling them the old days.
Yeah. Yeah, well, they are.
They are, yeah. But I think that's what gripped me too. Is my mind sort of had initially a moment of I'm reading a comic book for Mad Magazine, but a space age version of Mad Magazine, but so modernized that even kind of beyond where we're at in time now. And I think my mind was like, but it's just like the comics, but no, it's something completely different. And I really like that. I like that, that I recognize that immediately, but I didn't recognize it at the same time.
Great. Well, I'm glad you had that reaction because that's the kind of thing we're looking for.
Excellent. And what's the expectation of how often an issue will come out?
Well, we're planning on quarterly, every 3 months. Yeah, we'd like to do it monthly, but, it's just too exhausting to try to do something like that.
Even if you were doing it full time, just the magazine, I can't imagine how you would get an issue like that to that level done on a monthly basis.
No, it'd be impossible, I think.
Even just coordinating contributors to put in the stories and do the interviews alone would be enough to fill up a full-time job. Added to that, that would be too much.
Yeah.
Definitely. But no, kudos. I can't wait for everyone to see it. I can't imagine anybody looking at that and not just being blown away.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. But let me ask you, because you had mentioned the Once Upon a Time in Gravity City. Now, I get a little lost because I have no perception of time. It's just gone. And but I know I've read a lot of your work, but trying to place what came out when or in what anthology gets a little blurry for me. But you had a story in Once Upon a Time in Gravity City, didn't you?
Yes. It was called The Reaper.
That's right.
It was about someone throwing people off of the roofs of buildings or throwing them out of the roofs of buildings.
Yeah.
Criminals.
It's a good kid story. Yeah.
Yeah. But
PG-13. But we talked about this a little bit the other day. But what I really love about your writing style is, authors write in first person, third person, whatever, but you have this magical way of making me feel when I read your work as if you and I are sitting at a table, sharing a beer, or sitting at a fire, or walking through the woods, and you're just telling me a story. Like you're really talking directly to me. Is that a conscious choice that you made as a writer, or is that just kind of how you do it?
That is a conscious choice. I appreciate you saying that, because that's what I try to go for is almost like if you sat down and just recorded a conversation like that. Luckily quite a few people enjoy that, like you. There are some people that it's not right for.
Yeah, sure.
And I get some reviews where people, don't like that. But I like writing in first person. The funny thing is I never preferred first person when I'm reading, but when I'm writing, I prefer first person. I feel like I'm better at it. So
I think it's easier to write in first person because you can relate to your character a little more directly, as if you're instead of writing outside of them. Right.
Yeah, there are some difficulties to it. You can go back and forth between different characters' points of view, but generally in first person, you're going to just have at least one character at a time.
Right.
For sure. And sometimes one character through the whole story. So that can be difficult because you can never have scenes from anyone else's point of view. So all certain things can't happen in the story.
That's kind of painting yourself into a corner a little bit. Now, if you tried to go around that and say, okay, so this chapter is character 1 speaking in first person, but then you go to, let's say, your villain in chapter 2, and now the villain is speaking in first person. But unless you really identify that can get really confusing for the reader, I think.
Yeah, and actually, the book I'm working on now does that. I'm co-writing it with another author, Steve Bollier, and he is doing most of the villain stuff, and I'm doing most of the hero stuff. And he's got his voice, and I've got my voice. I mean, we still rewrite a little bit for each other, but for the most part, he created one character and wrote the story about him, and I'm doing the other character.
Wow. So how does that work? Do you start with an outline and then you each kind of fill in your own spots?
Well, in this case, it was really it went down a lot of twists and turns. So I have a series of books called the Red Raptor Files. It's they're young adult novels about a superhero sidekick, where he starts out as a sidekick.
Yeah.
I kind of see him as a combination of maybe Robin and Spider-Man in his personality.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with that.
And so he, so I wrote 2 books, and then I also wrote some short stories that took place in that universe, and they appeared in a couple of anthologies. Mm-hmm. And one of the authors in one of the other anthologies asked me if he could write a story in my universe, and I was thrilled. I was like, "Yeah, that's great. I would love to see it."
That's an honor.
And yeah, it is. So he wrote the story, and then he said, "What would you think about working with me to turn this into a novel, to make it novel length?" Mm-hmm. So I thought it sounded like a good idea. So we started working on that. And meanwhile, I was working on the 3rd book in the novel series, starring my character. Mm-hmm. And he, what we ended up doing was merging the stories together. So I know it sounds crazy because it seems like it shouldn't work, but it ended up working out really well. So we took his idea and my idea and merged them into one story and go back and forth between the 2 different characters until they meet, and then it just shows them from the different points of view. And so each chapter alternates between hero and villain and has the name of the character who's speaking in the chapter. So we'll say chapter 1, Art; chapter 2, Sawyer; chapter 3, Art; chapter 4, Sawyer. So whose chapter it is.
I see that. But do you have the challenge? Like when I try to write to an outline or anything, I find that the basic part of the chapter starts off in unison with the outline. And then my brain goes in a different direction. I come up with something else. And then the rest of my outline is messed up. So if he's writing his chapter and he just naturally kind of changes the story, you have to be ready to be on board with that when you do your chapter.
Well, the thing is that his was pretty much done.
Oh.
When I started. So, his storyline, his outline was already done, and he things have changed.
Yeah.
But nothing threw it so far off course that it didn't still align.
Oh, okay, good.
By the end.
Good.
So,
yeah, I was talking about this on my podcast. I think it was with Kimber. Maybe I was talking to her off the air about it. I don't remember. But, I'm working on my first full-length novel that I've been working on for years. And
congratulations.
Thank you. But when I filmed that one day on Jason Bourne, it kind of really affected my perception of the book. And then the book started taking off into a more spy thriller direction than it was meant to intentionally. And then there's bombs and there's government agencies and all this stuff because of one day that I had this influence. So I find that happens when I'm writing in general and try to stick to an outline. But if you guys are able to at least stay close enough to it to be in sync with each other, I could see that being a really beneficial project.
Yeah. Well, one of the main reasons we decided to combine them was that I was having trouble figuring out where my novel was going to go. I'm not very good about outlining. I'm good at beginnings and endings like a lot of people, and not so good at middles. So I was able to keep my beginning and my ending, and basically my middle turned out to be confronting his character. So it worked out really well that way.
That's good. So how do you write the part where you're writing the chapters together?
Just basically have the file in Dropbox where either of us can change it. And so we just have to make sure we're not both doing it at the same time.
Yeah.
Which we could if it was in Google Docs, but we didn't start it out that way. So it's basically,
right. Yeah. And, at least it's not like the old days of playing, chess through the mail where you have to, mail the manuscript to him and he's going to change it and then mail it back to you. And pretty soon it's 2027. We've colonized Mars and your book's coming out.
Yeah, that would be a nightmare.
Yeah, I think it would. I don't have the patience for that kind of thing anymore. I've been spoiled by because we grew up without all this.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And I have to say, as there's certain things I'm really glad I can do. I'm really glad I can do math in my head, that I don't need to rely on a calculator to do it. I'm glad I know how to shop at a store and keep a budget in my head, or like a rolling total, without having to type it all into a calculator. But at the same point, I'm so grateful that I can just reach people very quickly through text or email. I don't have to call and hope they're home and let the phone ring 9 times to find out they're not.
Yeah.
All those things that we had to do. And I'm grateful for the time that we live in. But at the same time, I'm really grateful I have the foundation that I built when I was younger.
Yeah. I think we were just in a time where we would still learn all those essential basic skills.
Yeah.
when they were necessary, but we've been able to live into a time when we don't necessarily need them all the time.
Exactly.
So it was a good transitional time, I guess.
Definitely. I mean, I remember one summer, and I think we even had our Atari by this point. So I had video games, but I spent the entire summer just playing drums and reading books. That's literally all I did that summer, and I loved it.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite memories looking back on my youth is really just spending the time being creative and putting everything I had into it.
Yeah.
On one side or the other. It was good. But I'm excited. So are you guys shooting for a target date for release, or is that kind of still up in the air at this point?
Well, the plan was to get it out before now, but then I got involved in the Gravity City thing, and that kind of got put on hold. And and then he started his own publishing company, actually, Athon Books, and so he's been a little busy with that. And so both of us kind of got caught up in other things, and the book is probably 80% done and kind of just waiting for us to. So I've been getting to it when I can, but I was hoping by the end of this year, so possibly the end of this year.
Well, and it's tough because you're a teacher, so you have a beyond full-time job.
Yeah.
It's not just that you work 40 hours a week plus driving time. It's that you have to grade papers, you have to do, you have to come up with tests and all this extra work that teachers have to do.
Yeah.
And as I appreciate that people put that much into educating our future generations. But for you to have your own life in a job like that is tough, because you have a family and you're a writer, and you're a very busy, beyond full-time guy.
Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I wonder how I do it. I don't know.
Yeah. Do you tend to just kind of write when everyone else is asleep and you stay up and the house is quiet and you can focus? Because I live alone, so I don't have to deal with any of that.
Yeah, I'm not very good in the morning, and tend to be very creative late at night. So I tend to write after everyone else goes to bed, and sometimes get too carried away, which makes getting up in the morning difficult. But that's my best time to write. So and definitely in the summertime and spring break and times like that, when I have some days off, I'll just immediately revert back to my natural rhythms and start staying up really late and sleeping in the morning.
Sure. Yeah. I don't know how many times I've been working in the studio, whether I'm writing or mixing or whatever, and just I realize that between the blinds, I can see the cracks of sunlight coming in, and I think I have not moved from this chair in 5 hours.
Yeah, right.
Because you get in that zone where it's kind of like when you're at a movie theater and you're watching a movie that you're really invested in, and you don't realize that you're in a movie theater. You don't realize you're in a body that's sitting in a chair, because you're like, the whole world is this movie. And then in that lull where they kind of give you a little break, maybe before the final battle or whatever, you kind of come out of it and you go, whoa.
Yeah.
And you see the edges of the screen again. Yeah. I find creativity to be exactly that same way. When I'm in the zone, the world around me it's not even there.
Yes.
Yeah. But that's good, because that's when you really pump out the stuff that it just comes to you. Do you feel sometimes like you're more of a vessel than the driving force behind it?
I do. I sometimes feel like it just kind of flows out of me.
Yeah.
And I'm not really consciously thinking about it. It's just my fingers are moving on the keyboard, and it's showing up on the page, and my brain's not conscious. Like whatever I am, I don't know, me is not consciously thinking of these words. It's just kind of just shooting out through my fingers.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I feel almost more like a conduit sometimes than I do the creative.
Yeah.
But since there's nobody here dictating it to me, I just feel like I can take creativity rights and say I did it.
Yeah.
It's okay to put my name on it and collect the royalties. I'm good with that.
Yeah, right.
Well, I want to talk to you a little bit about the Red Raptor series, but first, you just had another story that came out in an anthology called The Switcheroo, which I just finished reading last night, and I loved it. What now? This takes place in Gravity City, or it doesn't?
It does. It does not intentionally take place in the Gravity City universe, but I did purposely write it so that it could.
I guess I just assumed that, because why wouldn't I? It could easily be in the Gravity City universe. I just I didn't make any references to it or anything. I love shared universes personally. I love when different authors produce things in the same universe, or you find out that a character from one story is showing up in another character's story and things like that. I've always loved that since I was a kid. Yeah. I kind of wish that there was more crossover that made sense. I feel like whenever I see it done, a lot of times it's kind of forced, like putting Howard the Duck in Guardians of the Galaxy because they were playing 80s music. And I'm still kind of like, where did that storyline go? They set this up and then they just left it.
I think it was just a joke, a one-off joke.
It might have been, but I kind of got excited that there might be, a continuation to the Howard the Duck story.
Yeah.
But I think one thing that I felt was kind of forced was in one of the Star Wars, was it the prequels? I think the third one, E.T. was in it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like, that's not, there's no real cross between the two. If it was a galaxy far, far away, and I don't know, I kind of felt like that was just a forced kind of thing.
Yeah, I think I agree with that.
Yeah. But I do think it's cool, especially when you're writing with your friends or with, maybe colleagues that you don't know. And they're, like your friend was like, hey, I'd love to write something in your universe. That's a really cool feeling.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's a big compliment.
Now, can you tell us a little bit, it's such a fine line between giving too much away and, enough to make people interested, but not too much to where they don't need to read the story. So could you give us a little synopsis of The Switcheroo?
Well, it appears in an anthology called Beyond the Stars, Rocking Space. Beyond the Stars is a series of anthologies put out by Patrice Fitzgerald and edited by Ellen Campbell, and they put out some really good anthologies with a lot of good stories, a lot of good authors, some well-known, some brand new. And they get tons of submissions and have to, sift through them all and choose them. And so a few years ago, I submitted a story about a bounty hunter, and it was called an old-fashioned lust story.
I remember that one.
Yeah, and it got into one of them. It was in Beyond the Stars, Galaxy's Edge, and then it was chosen to be in the Best of Beyond the Stars last year. They reprinted it in their Best of anthology. So I thought when I saw that they were going to be doing another one this year, I decided to submit a story, and so I decided to go back to the same character because I kind of enjoyed writing in that voice, in that bounty hunter. Sometimes I like writing people that are really different than I am.
Right. Yeah.
It's like very different than I am. And it's so fun to do someone like that, kind of a tough guy. It's a little bit almost kind of film noir or old detective pulp novel type of story, but set in the future in space.
It's so funny that you say that, because when I read that, I remember part of me started hearing like this reverbed out saxophone in the background, and almost that, that film noir narration that you would get while you're looking at the guy sitting behind his desk wearing the brimmed hat and all that. Yeah. It's so funny that I made that connection.
Oh, I'm glad you did. That's what I was going for. And others have said that. So I'm glad it at least works for some people, because that's what I'm trying to do. I love those old detective stories and those old movies but I love sci-fi is my big love. So, genre. So I like to be able to combine them. And I mean, Blade Runner is my favorite movie.
Oh, okay.
And in some ways that's kind of a combination. So my stories aren't like Blade Runner at all, I don't think, other than combining those genres.
Right. Yeah.
But it's a story of a bounty hunter who is really, really good at his job, but keeps encountering people that are better.
There's always a bigger fish.
Yeah, exactly.
But when you wrote Just an Old-Fashioned Lust Story, was that a challenge for you? Because that setting is kind of out of your norm.
Yeah.
Not the space part or the bounty hunter part, but the lust part is not something that I've experienced really a lot in your writing. It was kind of like you said, I want to see if I can do this.
Yeah, that's a good point. I did want to do something that was a little more adult than what I'd been writing. So I've written comic books and I've written, young adult books and history books, but I've never written anything too adult. And this one was a little, both of these stories are about the same character and they're a little more adult than my usual.
Yeah.
Nothing. They're not erotica or anything like that.
Right.
Not even close, but they are definitely more adult than what I usually write.
Yeah, it definitely was something that I would say was a few steps in that direction more than your normal stuff. Because, typically you write about, comic book heroes and things like that, where other than more so like a playful flirtation, you're really not going to have that because it's just not part of the genre, really.
Right. And I think maybe it's to some extent I needed to get it out of my system. I don't know.
It could be. But I think we need to experiment and we need to push our boundaries because you don't really know what you're capable of doing or what might work unless you go out of your way to do it.
Right.
And I like doing that musically. If I just wrote the same, piano, violin stuff all the time, you're not going to grow without adding something to that.
Right. Right.
So no, I applaud you for doing it. And I think I thought it was very tasteful. There was nothing where I went, dude, this is my friend that just wrote.
Yeah.
There was nothing that I found where I was like, okay, that's just a little weird. I don't think I could write anything like that. I don't think that that's within my boundaries because I think anytime I've tried, it just sounds too cheesy to me. It just sounds unrealistic and antiseptic.
Yeah. And I am afraid when I do it, that's what the reaction is going to be. Especially when I wrote the first one, I just sent it out and started thinking, oh, what did I do? and then when it got a good reaction, then when it got chosen, I was excited. When it got chosen for the best of, I was even more excited. And that gave me the confidence to do it again, But I was terrified when I first sent it out.
Well, and that's really the thing that I don't really know how much the public thinks about this. But as artists, when we put something out into the world, it's not, we're bearing our soul. We're putting our value of ourselves out to the world to be judged because we value ourselves based on what we create, right?
Right.
So when you put a book out, when I put an album out, it's saying, here's me, here's what I created. This all is a part of me. Now you guys are going to judge it as you're going to judge it. So when you get reviews like, I'm not happy that you wrote it as if you're sitting down telling me a story. I'd rather have it in first person. I mean, you can't please everybody. There's always going to be some stupid nitpicky thing like that that's really irrelevant.
Yes. Yeah, you have to have a thick skin for sure.
Yeah, you're not going to change your writing style because some guy on Amazon didn't like the fact that you didn't write it in or you wrote it in first person.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you just have to, pay attention to the good reviews and just realize that some people aren't going to like it, or some people may it's just not for them, and some people are just jerks and they just like to go do that kind of stuff, or they like to troll and stuff. So, you never know which one it is for sure, but.
Well, I don't mind people not liking what I did or having something constructive or helpful to say. If they might have said something like, well, the album was like, I like the idea, but the sound wasn't good, or the mix was bad, or it was too tinny for my ears, or like you could take that and go, okay, I really need to take this to heart and listen back and see if I agree with it and maybe modify if I need to. But for somebody to just come on and go, yeah, I just didn't like it.
Yeah.
That's not helpful. What didn't you like? And is your feedback, if you're going to take the time to leave feedback on a public forum, make it something like, say, well, I didn't like it because I thought the story was more for younger people, or, something that's helpful to other potential readers. But just to say, I don't like it or give it a 1-star rating, that doesn't tell anybody whether they would like the book or not. Like, just, if you're such a critic, say something more.
Yeah. And the worst review I ever got was for the first Red Raptor book, Sidekick. And it was on Goodreads. And I actually, the girl that wrote the review was honest, and she said why she didn't like it. And, I can't disagree with her reasoning if that's how she feels, Yeah. So even though it was 1 star, she actually said, I've never wished so hard that I could give something 0 stars. Wow. That hurts. Yeah. But she also admitted that she only read the first fourth of the book. And so a lot of the things she was complaining about were things that she assumed were going to happen later in the book, and that didn't. It was kind of the opposite. So, in that book, I kind of set some things up to give the reader expectations based on their presumed knowledge of, Batman and Robin and comic books in general and things like that. And then I try to pull the rug out from under them at the end and in reverse everything. And that's part of the way I wrote it. Mm-hmm. But if you only read the first fourth of the book, you're going to think, oh my God, this is just basically fan fiction, And
did she say in the review that she only read that much?
Yeah, she admitted she only read a fourth of it.
Okay, well, at least she said that. But if you haven't read the entire, like, what's the point of leaving a review? I
guess her point was it bothered her so much that she couldn't even finish the book, I think is what she was trying to say.
Huh. Did you find that aside from that, did she make any valid points that you could look back at and go, well, I could see what she's saying? Or
in some ways, I mean, when I wrote the second book, I did take some of that criticism into a lot of people. When they read my first book, they think, well, this is similar to, this character is similar to Robin. Mm-hmm. And I understand that, because that's where I started out from, was thinking I'm going to write a book about a sidekick to a superhero. Mm-hmm. And Robin's the prototypical, he's the original sidekick, and I'm a huge Batman fan, and a lot of it was influenced by my love of Batman and Robin over the years, and reading lots and lots of comic books and having a lot of experience in the comic book industry. It was, in some ways, it was kind of a love letter to Batman, mm-hmm. to the idea of it. But I also wanted another thing that some people don't realize is that even though Batman is my favorite comic book character and probably my favorite character in all of fiction, he's one of the only DC characters that I really enjoy. And that when I was growing up, I was always a Marvel fan except for Batman. Okay. So one of the things I wanted to do was kind of take the Marvel type of perspective that Stan Lee kind of started and apply it to DC characters. And so in my mind, Superman is Superman, and he dresses up in a disguise as Clark Kent to fool people, but he's actually Superman. Mm-hmm. But Peter Parker is actually Peter Parker and puts on a mask to become Spider-Man, to hide the fact that he's Peter Parker, but that's who he really is Peter Parker.
Right. Yeah. It's a reverse of the identity. Yeah.
So I wanted to write a book that was about the people, and that the fact that they just happen to be superheroes rather than the superheroes who just happen to have secret identities.
Right. Yeah. It's a whole different perspective too, because that gives the character a different basis for all of their actions, for their reason for doing it, for whether they're compelled or it's just the thing that they do. Like, I always kind of felt like Batman was a guy that did it because he felt he had to.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and he took a certain amount of pride or glee, I guess, in capturing people. But I always felt like it was something that he was compelled to do more so than, you know what, I'm going to go out tonight and see if I can stop crime. He's like, well, you know what, something's happening somewhere, so I better get out there. Yeah, right. So being that Batman is your favorite character, and now, you know, in our youth, it was comic books. And now we've had so many different people playing Batman. How have you felt about the different universes that they've created for Batman nowadays? I kind of like that they reboot it every once in a while because times change. You know, when Tim Burton did his one in the late 80s, that was, you know, you couldn't do the 60s thing anymore, which then, you know, they did try to do in the 90s and failed at. But, you know, I loved the Batman movie in 1989. I just loved it. Okay, so who is Batman? And that was Michael Keaton. Michael Keaton. Okay, yeah. But when I watch it now, I don't love it as much. You know, I still love it nostalgically, but it's still a little campy for me and stuff. And I really loved The Dark Knight. You know, Batman Begins in The Dark Knight with Christian Bale. Also, I felt the same way. And, you know, like 10 years later, it's kind of, I watch it again and I still really like it, but I don't love it as much as when I saw it, you know? So, you know, well, I think Christian Bale was probably the best person to personify my idea of what Batman is, because the way that he kind of, you know, he always plays these extreme characters. And I think that he was the most isolated personally of all the Batmans in the movie series. I agree. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. But I think the one that insults me the most, and I enjoy it on if I just watch it for the entertainment, this is a campy, cheesy movie, I can do it. But if I try to take it even slightly seriously, and this is not a knock on any of the actors, it's the story I had a problem with, was the one with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Oh, I hate it. It's, yeah. And I feel bad for George Clooney because it wasn't I don't blame him at all. Yeah, no, not at all. Dealing with what he was dealing with. But it was a tough sell. Yeah. Batman and Robin was my least favorite movie of all time. I mean, literally there are worse B movies and things, but they don't horrify me the way Batman and Robin did. I don't think that Chris O'Donnell and Clooney really had that kind of chemistry that I would have hoped for. No. I mean, I think he was too old for Robin, and I think he didn't embody the character at all. Again, it wasn't his fault, I don't think. I think you got to work with what you've got. I think the problem I had with the Schwarzenegger movie was that I didn't dislike the storyline. It was just, it went so far into the cheesy dialogue. It got so ridiculous. The way that they moved, like, you know, driving on the ice, John the Statue and all that. I think it just pushed the limits a little too far for me. And then when he freezes the room when he goes to steal the big diamond, and he freezes that dinosaur statue and it screams. Yeah. I'm like, first of all, it's a statue. And second of all, it's frozen. There's two reasons for this thing not to be making any noise right now. Yeah. Joel Schumacher was really going for the 60s campy Adam West type of thing, the modern version of that. And it was just failed. It failed because he was doing that. And it also failed as that as well. So it was doubly bad for that. So the one thing that I think that they did a great job on in that movie, and I want to say only that movie, was that you really did feel for the villain's character at certain times. You know, I think that says more about the character than about anything in the movie, though. I mean, that's the story of Mr. Freeze. You know, true. That's you know, it's a tragic story. Yeah, and and when he's well written in the comic books, it's excellent, and in the animated series, it's excellent. But I just have to wonder, you know, looking at Schwarzenegger's career, he's played in some pretty great movies and some that were not great. I mean, he's really taken a lot of chances in his career doing movies like Twins and the one where he gave birth, and you know that kind of stuff. But I have to say, I have to wonder, when he read this script, was it like, I don't care, I want to be in a Batman movie? Or was he really taken by the character? Like, I really have to wonder what his motivation for doing that was.
I don't know. That's a good question. He may have liked the old Batman series in the 60s and thought that they were going to do that and thought it was fun, you know?
Well, that's true. Because when you read something on the page and what it turns out to be in the end, especially when you're dealing with a heavily graphic movie, I don't mean graphic in like the blood way, but just like there's the stunning environments and the things that they make for Gotham City. You really don't know how it's going to turn out. You can make assumptions and, you know, even the way you film it, you can go, okay, this is going to be great. But then the way they edit it, it's not the movie that you thought you were making.
Right.
So it's easy for me to sit back and look at the end result and go, you know, what was he thinking when what he agreed to might not be at all what I see.
Yeah. Right.
You know, so I have to be fair about that. But I think it's cool that they did it. I mean, I love the graphic side of it, though. The stunning environments for Gotham City. I don't know who has all this money in their universe. You know, I don't know how that happened, because it seems like it's mostly a bunch of, you know, middle class and poor people and like 5 really rich people. That's about it. You know, so I'm glad are they doing it anymore? Do you know?
Ben Affleck was supposed to do a Batman movie. He was supposed to write, direct, and star in it, or I think maybe co-write and direct and star in it. And I think Batman and Superman and Justice League turned out so bad that he just decided to dump the whole thing. Yeah,
I didn't see Batman versus Superman.
Yeah.
After watching Man of Steel, I couldn't get myself to care because I just thought that was what it taught me about these kind of movies. And tell me if you disagree. But I'm watching these long, drawn-out battle scenes, and I'm like, it doesn't matter what they're hitting each other with. It doesn't matter what they throw each other through, because you can't really hurt each other. So what is the end game of any of these battles?
Right.
You know, and it was so long. God, that movie was 72 hours.
Felt like it.
It did. So when I saw that Batman versus Superman was coming out, part of me went, I want to know what Affleck is like as Batman. And then the other part of me went, but I don't want to sit through this.
Yeah.
So I have to wonder, because Man of Steel got a lot of bad reviews. I have to wonder how much of that hurt Batman versus Superman before it even started.
It certainly didn't help, but Batman versus Superman had its own problems.
Yeah.
So,
I always love that interview where they focus in on the sad looking, and of course, you know, I can't think of the guy who plays Superman, but he's all excited, and then there's Ben Affleck who's just deflating before your eyes.
Yeah. Well, he's a really good director, and writer. I mean, an Oscar-winning screenwriter. So you know, he knows the material was not there,
and he's a really good actor too. And I think that he's one of those people that can just fill a lot of different roles and be very good at it. But it's like you said, you're working with what you're given, and there's only so much you can do, and so much of it is out of your hands.
I didn't mind him as Batman. I mean, he wasn't my favorite, but I didn't hate him as Batman. He certainly wasn't the worst part of those movies, as far as I'm concerned.
What's your stance on Val Kilmer? He just did the one movie, I think.
Yeah, I thought he was all right for, again, what he was given. He at the time, he was my favorite actor. After Tombstone and a couple other movies he was in. Yeah, he was my favorite. And The Doors, after The Doors and Tombstone, he was my favorite actor. So, you know, I kind of like to see him as Batman. He didn't knock it out of the park, but.
Right. Yeah, it was good. And I thought he and Kim Basinger had some good, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
no, it was, who was married to Tom Cruise? The British lady.
Nicole Kidman.
Nicole Kidman, thank you. Yeah, I thought that they had some really good chemistry, that they were believable.
Yeah, that movie was all right.
Yeah, Val Kilmer, though, I think my favorite role of his was probably Heat.
Oh, that was good.
I just wish he would have been really in it more.
Yeah.
You know? It's definitely some good stuff. But yeah, I could see being a Batman fan. And, you know, the comic books, you really kind of write him a little more yourself. You kind of develop who he is more on your own than you do in the movies, because you have to fill in a lot of the blanks. Yeah. But it's nice to see things on the screen too.
Yeah.
You know, so getting to more into the Red Raptor series though. So this is really sort of a young adult, almost a coming of age time when this particular story starts, wasn't it? Kind of like, I kind of felt like it brought me back to some of my, like, maybe middle school crushes in that area. Because he kind of falls in love a little bit while he's learning to be a superhero.
Yeah. I had that in there. I wanted to have a little bit of romance, but not go overboard. I didn't want to make it the central part of the story.
Is it a hard thing to balance that? Because you have to have enough elements in there to make it a part of the story, but not so that overshadows.
Well, it was a little bit difficult to balance, but, mostly, to be honest, I was just channeling my 16-year-old self and thinking about the way I felt.
Right.
And it, as long as I can remember that stuff and try to write in the voice of myself at 16, I think, it's fairly successful.
Now, you have 2 stories out in the Red Raptor series now.
Yeah.
Is there going to be a third, do you think?
Yeah, the third one is the one that I'm working on with the other author.
Oh, okay. Okay, good.
It's my half of the story is from Red Raptor's point of view, and then his is from his character's point of view, based on the original short story he wrote.
Okay. And do you see any of the other characters because they're all strong characters? Do you see any like spin-off series with any of the other people?
Definitely. I've actually written a couple of other short stories that have been published in other anthologies of other characters. So a Black Harrier, who's his mentor, has a story in one anthology, and then the villain Piero has a story in another anthology. And then another friend of mine who's an author actually wanted to write in my universe also.
Wow.
Noel Martinez, and he basically did the same thing as Steve did, and he wrote a short story based on my characters that takes place in the future, and now he's working on a novel, and he's more than halfway done with it, I think, and that'll be the fourth book. Will be his novel about these characters when they're older.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, cool. So I'm really excited about it.
I really like the idea of these anthologies because for the reader, you can get a lot of good material for a really good price. And if, a couple of the stories are duds, it's not a big deal because you're bound to find at least 3 or 4 things that you're probably going to like.
Yes.
And it seems like the sci-fi genre and the paranormal romance genre are really big into these series or these sort of box sets.
Yeah, they are.
And it's great because if you have, you could gain fans from, fans of the other authors that might read your story and go, hey, I like this guy too. And then kind of like, oh, I want to see what else he's done.
Yeah. It always increases my sales, not just from people discovering it, but also crossover. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I would imagine that anytime that you see an opportunity, it's like, hey, sweet, let's get in on this if I can.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I love being part of it. I love working with other writers.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever thought about going into like the horror genre or are you really wanting to stick with sci-fi and superhero for now?
I actually have a horror anthology. It's not, it's kind of horror, I should say. It's not, there's some horror stories in it. It's a book called Tres Puercos. It's an anthology of all my own stories.
Oh, nice.
that I wrote. It's the first story in there is it's the 3 little pigs from the viewpoint of the big bad wolf, but it's a crime, kind of a crime story, adult crime story. Yeah, and it's in a little bit of the same voice as the bounty hunter stories I did, but it's in first person. I think I did in first person. It's hard to remember now. It was years ago. But there's some horror stories in there. And I did there's a monthly anthology that I love called Tales from the Canyons of the Damned. Ooh. And I've had a couple stories published in that. And they were both along the horror lines. One is sci-fi horror and the other one is actual horror. It's a Halloween story about a serial killer.
Nice. Well, we all know that I'm into the horror stuff. That's I've definitely not been shy about that. In fact, I just approved the mix, and then last night I approved the final mastering and rendered the final files for the last Haunted Holidays album. And
cool.
It's funny that this time of year when I'm already seeing Christmas decorations out, and it's still 108 degrees here in Nevada. That I'm thinking about trying to recreate those emotions for the holidays for me. I always have to write this stuff in the summer, and it's really hard to recreate the atmosphere. When you're trying to work on something, is there anything that you do to try and inspire that atmosphere that you're working in, or do you just kind of sit down and the rest of the room doesn't really matter?
A lot of times I'll listen to music, and it'll inspire me. Sometimes I just sit in the quiet, just with my own thoughts. But a lot of times I'll put on music. So if I'm writing the Red Raptor books, I'll put on some superhero theme music. I'll just put on Spotify, and there's lists that people have already made that have like the Avengers theme, Batman theme, and all that stuff. And that helps get me in that mindset.
And there's so much to choose from now with all the movies that have come out. I mean, just the Avengers movies alone. Yeah.
And so, I a lot of times I'll and then I'll just listen to songs I like. I'll put a playlist on and listen to some stuff that I enjoy, and it helps get the juices going. And one of my first stories was inspired by a song that was actually in the movie Heavy Metal, Veteran of the Psychic Wars.
Oh yeah, by Styx.
Yeah. By Blue Oyster Cult.
Oh, Blue Oyster Cult. Why do I always think that Styx? That's a great song. In fact, when we were in Jokers, we were covering that. We tried it a couple times, didn't we?
I think we played it. I don't think we ever played it live.
I don't think so. But I remember doing it at rehearsal.
Yeah, it's an awesome song.
Yeah, it is.
So I wrote a story based on that song. My thoughts on what that song was about.
Oh, sweet. And, what's that called?
It's called. I'm gonna have to go back and look real quick. It was in the first anthology I was ever in.
That's such an amazing feeling, isn't it? Though to that, especially that first one, because it validates you a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
it's in an anthology called The Artifact, and it's called Tenacity.
Cool. I will have to check that out. That's such a good song. I'll be very curious to get your take on that. It's funny, when I was about halfway through the novel, because I've written the full draft and it's been in editing for a while, but when I was about halfway through, I realized what I needed to do the ending, and I had picked a selection of songs from the show Lost to be the music that I would listen to while I was writing the last bit of the book. And it worked great, but it was really emotionally a very difficult thing to do. And I remember I'm I'm literally got tears streaming down my eyes, and I'm trying to type and I can't even see the screen anymore. And I had to go back and edit so much because the typing was just terrible at that point. but to get in that right, it's kind of like putting a candle on in the room to get that right atmosphere.
Yeah.
It's, those are some great tools that we can use to do that.
Yeah.
And I think about guys like Edgar Allan Poe, who basically had silence.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Of course, I don't have to write with a quill pen though. So
yeah. Yeah.
He's like, how many times do I have to write the Raven?
Yeah.
But that's cool. Yeah. No, I'm really excited for you, and I'm really excited about this new Gravity City book. I think that I just think people are going to love it when they see it. It's so stunning. Thanks. I wish you guys the absolute best, and we're going to have some links for you guys in the show notes. But man, congratulations! You've accomplished a lot. You've written a lot of stuff, and you've had a lot of stuff in anthologies, and you've been published. I mean, it just shows that you're not some guy that just likes writing.
Thanks.
but it takes putting yourself out there so that people would even know to reach out to you in the first place. If you never did that, and I feel like some of the greatest stuff that's out there is stuff that's never going to be seen because people are too afraid to take that step.
absolutely. That's what I tell my students. No one's ever going to know if you don't put it out there.
Exactly. And just throwing it out there isn't going to do it either. Like, you got to let people know it's out there. You could have the greatest piece of art on the internet, and if people don't know it's there, they don't know to click on a link to get to it or search for it.
Right.
It doesn't matter that it's there.
Right.
But I think a lot of people that are artists, and I suffer from this too, is that I just hate the marketing side of it so much.
Oh, it's horrible.
It is that I'm like, I'm just going to put it out there and people already know me. It's fine.
Yeah, that's what you think.
Right, but it does not work.
Nope.
And there's proof of it. Every time that I just put a project out there and don't, and I'll maybe put a Facebook post or Pinterest or whatever, and nobody cares because nobody knows about it. Right. So my suggestion to people is, don't be afraid to put yourself out there. Be prepared for whatever feedback, and just remember that that's coming from whoever's opinion based on whatever their thoughts are.
Yeah.
Listen to what they have to say, decide whether it means anything to you or not, and either make modifications or don't.
Yeah, that's it.
And just keep pushing, because it's an endless thing. We're never going to stop being creative, because that's just what we do.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't imagine not doing it. It's just, just so antithetical to who I am.
It's funny, whenever I think about what would I do if I ran out of ideas for things to create, whether it be a book or a song or whatever. And I always picture, in Harry Potter, I think his name was Aragog, the spider. And, he's dead and he's upside down with his legs just up in the air. Like, that's how I picture myself. If I ever stopped being creative, I might as well just do that.
Yeah, that's true.
So before we go, is there something that would be something that you would love to try, but you've just never really connected with it as far as writing goes?
A couple times I've tried to write a Western, and I don't know why it just didn't work. I've written some steampunk stuff that takes place in the Old West, but true Western so far I haven't gotten to, but I do want to.
Yeah, where did steampunk come from all of a sudden? It just was there.
I think it was big with books for quite a while before Hollywood caught on, and then that's when most people found out about it. Was, when with recent Hollywood movies that take place in that genre. But
yeah, I'm definitely one of those people, because I had literally no idea that even existed, and then all of a sudden I started seeing these really weird goggles and hats and goggles attached to hats, and I was like, what the hell is this?
Well, it's kind of it's mostly alternate history stuff, or some of it takes place in the future.
Oh, okay.
A lot of it's alternate history. What if we had this technology in the Victorian age or whatever?
Oh, yeah. I think you could do a lot of that with Egypt too. I would think.
Yeah.
Was Wild Wild West, the Will Smith movie, was that kind of the first introduction to it? Because it from what I recall, there was maybe some of that those kind of artifacts. Or am I just off?
No, yes. Wild Wild West was definitely a steampunk movie, but so was the old TV show. I mean, a lot of people the idea of steampunk didn't come around, I think, until the 80s, when they actually started naming it steampunk.
Oh, okay.
But there are some precursors to that, and a Wild Wild West is generally considered to be a very early steampunk thing, because they did have that train and all those gadgets and all that stuff.
Right. Yeah, that's what I was picturing in my head. So I'm not crazy.
Nope, not at all.
Well, at least not with regards to that.
Yeah.
I won't speak on anything else.
Yeah.
Well, Chris, man, thanks so much for coming on the show, man. It's always great to talk to you, and glad we got to hang out some when I lived in Cali.
Yeah.
And we'll definitely keep in touch, but I'm very impressed with the work that you've done. There's nothing I've read of yours that I haven't looked back on and said, I really enjoyed that.
Well, I love all your stuff too.
Thanks.
And thanks for having me on. It was really fun.
Absolutely. Well, keep us posted on the release of the new Gravity City series. And I think it's going to be great. People are going to love it.
Yeah. Thank you.
If they're not, they have no soul. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Probably do. Take care, buddy. We'll talk to you soon.
You too. All right. Bye.
Bye. Yeah, 30 years, man. 30 years of friendship. That is a very, very long time. And I realize I've known Travis just as long because I met him, I think the week that I got, the job, or the week we started rehearsals, which was, I think, the week after I got the gig. And so, yeah, it's been a long time for both of those guys, and very grateful for those friendships. I'm so honored to know so many just amazing people who happen to also be incredibly talented. And thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of the HaskinCast Podcast. Please remember to leave feedback, ratings, all those good things that help other people find the show. Thanks a lot, guys. We'll see you with our special episode in a couple of days.